Abigail here again. I've got another artist interview today, and today I'm with Laura Story. How are you, Laura?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to talk to you. We've never interviewed you before, so I'm excited.
I know. What's taking so long?
I
I'm
don't
sure. I'm
know.
sure it was me. I'm sure it was me, not you.
Well, you have had a lot happening lately, and you are a Christian recording artist, a author. You've got some really cool stuff out, so we're going to talk about it all day.
Fantastic.
Okay. So first, let's get started with music. We're a radio station. We want to hear it. So tell me, how did you get started in music and how did God take
Yes.
you on that journey?
Very good question. So I initially I started with orchestra. Isn't that so weird? I was a orchestra dork, dorchestra as my high school sweetheart, now husband. He was an athlete, so he played bass. I'm sorry, I played bass. He played baseball, and so that's kind of how we were rival activities in high school. But I started just classical music, sang in my church, things like that. But I really didn't sing very much in front of people. I was very much a behind the scenes person and have always loved songwriting and anything where like supporting other people, being in the spotlight. So I did that for a while. In college, got involved with a band that we were kind of like a Caedmon's Call cover band. That's how we kind of started, but played bass with them. I wrote probably my first song that I ever wrote that anyone other than my mom had heard is a song called Indescribable. But still all that was very behind the scenes. And it wasn't until about 10, 11 years ago that I wrote a song called Blessings. And that's when I feel like God kind of moved me from the back of the stage to the forefront of it. Mostly because the song was so personal and so intimate that it kind of only made sense for me to sing it. And that was an interesting thing too, because I knew I wasn't the best singer out there, but God began to kind of show me that being in music industry it's not so much about being the best at something as much as it's okay, being willing to step, into that path that God's calling you to walk, both in
Yeah.
life and in ministry.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about the journey with Blessings? I
Mm-hmm.
know I've still heard that song on the radio and it's been around forever and it's such a beautiful song.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's, a lot of people will say, "Golly, that's this, God used that. You wrote that song for me." And the more you hear about my story, the more it becomes obvious. No, I wrote that for me, definitely. And I'm so thankful that other people could resonate with it. But for me, I wrote it in a time where we were about 5 years out from my husband going through a long and somewhat disappointing recovery from having a brain tumor and having brain surgery. And I say somewhat disappointing because when we first found out the news as newlyweds that Martin had a brain tumor, I think I initially thought, okay, that's okay, little bump in the road from our plan here, but we're just gonna barrel forward and we can, it's okay, like we have our plan, it's okay if it takes a little detour. But the thing that we were beginning to grapple with kind of around the time that I wrote the song was that if this really is a detour, how come it's not coming back to the road? Because we had this idea of what God's good and perfect plan for our lives looked like, but God wasn't healing my husband as quickly as we wanted. It wasn't healing him in all the ways medically that we're wanting to see him healed. And so, and I tell you now, kind of, I guess 15 years out from that initial surgery, Martin still lives with a brain injury. He still lives with a pretty substantial disability. So the song Blessings is still very close to our hearts because we're still grappling every day, literally every day. It's not that we haven't learned anything, but we're still grappling with this idea of how do we reconcile a good God that has good plans for his kids with the brokenness that still exists in our lives. And really it's like how we even when we don't understand how all of it fits together, what we do know as believers is that we're called to walk through it in faith. We're called to continue to step forward, to continue to trust, even in long seasons of not understanding why God works the way he does. So that was more than you asked for. That was way more than you asked for. But yeah, that's how the Song of Blessings came about, but also kind of still what it even means to me today.
I love that. That's so good and so deep. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And okay, so now I want to talk about your book.
Oh yeah. Well, it's all the same. Anyone that's listened to my music or read any of my books, they're probably like, hey, she kind of talks about the same thing every time. And and I really do talk about the same thing, but it's more about the different ways that God is teaching me the same lesson in different seasons. And so the book, I have a new song out called Hello Unknown, but the book is called So Long Normal. And it's this idea of, I started writing it in the very beginning of, the COVID pandemic, when everything normal in our lives was just shattered. And at first I was just this frenzied mess. And my kids are like, wow, Mom, you're kind of anxious all the time. And realizing that even though I've always thought of myself as a person of faith, like we really were able to find out how much faith we had when it came to something where everything else is being pulled out from under us.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in a condemning way, because God knows our hearts, and he knows, it's okay if we don't have to have this huge faith. It tells us in the scriptures, we should have faith the size of a mustard seed in a huge God. But that's kind of, I feel like so much of the pandemic was bringing us back to square one. Even in the way that we talk about it, and the ways that I've heard so many people talk about, like, I just wish things would get back to normal. Because really what we're wanting is some sort of stability for our hearts. And that's where I feel like God, and through this book, the book is just stuff that God's teaching me right now about how I don't have to have my hope set on normal. Yeah. I don't have to have my hope set on the return of, my hope doesn't have to be set on a certain presidential candidate. Doesn't have to be set on a certain low count of COVID. Even though these things, they're important in world, but they're important in life, but our souls don't have to be tethered to circumstances in order for us to experience stability and peace. And so that we can say so long to normal in order to embrace something better that God has for us.
I love that. Speaking right to my own heart. My life has been anything but normal in the past 2 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is so great. And I also hear that there is a study guide and videos that people can use to go along with it.
Yes. So we filmed a Bible study, and that was really fun. They made me do a zip line for the Bible study. So you got to check that out. Even if you just want to Google the clip of me, bawling my eyes out, terrified as I'm going down the zip line. But the reason why I used the analogy of a zip line so many times in the book, because so often that is faith. It's like you're stepping out into the unknown, and it feels like you're about to plummet to your death. But the truth is, anything that we go through as a believer, we are tethered to God through the person of Jesus Christ. And as long as we believe that work is sturdy, we can be sturdy. And the scripture teaches us, and this is where you have to get into the book for me to unpack this a little bit more, because I don't want to open up a can of worms here. But one of the things that the scriptures even teach us is sometimes God actually allows a shaking. He's not the author of evil. He's not the originator of sin. We know that from the scriptures. But sometimes he actually allows life to be shaky, kind of as this check engine light to show us where we're leaning on things in this world for security and stability, when really we need to be leaning on him. Yes. And not as a mean convicting thing for him, but almost showing us you're not going to live fully if you're dependent on people's opinions. You're not going to live fully if you're dependent on having X amount of dollars in your 401k. Laura, you're going to lead so much of a more free, more peaceful life if you're grounded on me and you get to let everyone else off the hook because you're not looking to them to be your stability. You can just be a blessing to them and they can be a blessing to you. Sorry, that's like
Yeah.
way more than I can unpack for you right now.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. This is so good. But that's all we have time for today. So
Hey,
tell people.
thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been so good. Tell people how they can get your book, how they can find your music.
Yes, I have a lot in the trunk of my car. I have some books in the trunk of my car. So if you see me on the road, no. So my website, laurastorymusic.com. I'm on the social medias. I'm with the interwebs. So you can Google whatever, but wherever you buy books, wherever you buy music, that's where you can find my stuff.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, for talking with me today.
Hey,
it's been so
thanks
good.
for taking time.
Yes,
See ya.
have a great day.